How's it going, guys? Someone wrote in, suggested that I comment on the consistency of some bark, so that's what I've done. I've got a couple pieces of bark here that I've collected from around the property, and I'm going to comment on the consistency. But I figured that I would also talk about, their characteristics other than consistency. Just so let's see, where should we start? This one, we can start with this one. This is not actually from a tree, if it'll come in focus. This is from a vine that I found. But it's obviously, you can see it's a very woody vine. So it's nice. You can see it's a lot stringier than all the other barks that I collected. It kind of peeled rather than just kind of breaking off. And I think, it's a lot, it's kind of a lively bark, right? That's kind of the way I would describe it compared to some of these other ones. It's very lively. Yeah, so it's got a nice color. It's not too dark. There's no moss or anything growing on it. So let's try and break off a piece here, or shred off a piece, like I said. Well, let's give it a taste. Very bitter. Very bitter. Woo. And yeah, it's just kind of I wouldn't really say chewy, but it's not really breaking apart, right? It's kind of pulping rather than breaking apart and being eaten. So yeah, that's the vine. And so, sorry, I don't really know the names of trees, so you'll just have to forgive me when I just describe, oh, it's this kind of tree or that kind of tree. That's the best I can do. So let's see. That was that one. Fine. I have to cleanse the palate. Let's try. Oh, this one. This one came from. This one came from a pine tree, some kind of pine tree, and you can see it's a lot flakier than the last one. It's got kind of a green tint to it. If it'll focus, there we go. And you can see it's it's a lot more broken up. It feels kind of. It's a wet day. It's been raining all day, but it still kind of feels drier. Yeah, it's got a nice dark color on the back side. I don't know if I showed you the back side of the other one, but it's for comparison, it's much lighter. So yeah, let's give it a taste. Yeah, it's not as bitter, have a more earthy taste. Very dry. It's as was the other one that gets kind of pulp. This one's just seems to be actively sucking all of the moisture out of my mouth. It's pretty terrible, actually. And it did just like disintegrate as soon as it entered my mouth. Not much of a texture. It's just very very dry. Very dry. I think I would take the bitter vine over the pine tree any day. Don't go for pine trees, guys. Unless you really don't like bitter stuff, then maybe you take the dry. Woo! Very dry. Alright, so let's see. This was actually the first thing I collected. I'm not really sure what kind of tree it came from. It was just in the garden there. But I don't know if you can really see, but there's like this layer. It's kind of a layered bark, and this top layer is just all moss. It's just kind of this very green, very small moss. I'm just gonna peel that layer off. I don't know, did it focus in? You can kind of see there, and that's what that moss layer looks like, and then that's what the underside of that looks like, the actual bark itself. So yeah, lots of moss on there. I'm not sure why some of these are a lot more mossy than others, but obviously this is a mossy one. It's kind of in between like the vine and the pine tree. You can see it's kind of bendy, it's kind of terry, but not as much as the vine. So I'm not entirely sure what to expect, other than maybe it's somewhere in between the vine and the pine tree in terms of taste and texture. So we'll give it a go. You can see it's very it's almost like a ribbon or that. So let's go ahead. So I'm going to grab a part that's still got a bit of that moss on it, but also has some of the underbark. Oh, it's actually pretty pleasant. It doesn't have too much taste. It's not really pulping. It's not really turning into like an edible pulp like the vine is, and it's not it's not dry like the pine. That's actually, I'm gonna go for another piece there. That's actually rather pleasant. I mean, it just tastes like, to me, that's what I would think of when I'm just talking about bark, right? It's a very neutral just experience overall, which compared to the previous two is actually rather nice. So yeah, not too bad. I will wash that one down. Let's see. So this is from not a pine tree, but it was kind of like a pine tree. I don't know. I can't really show you what the tree looks like. I don't think we have any. I'm not where I gathered the tree, so I'm just the bark. So I'm just looking around. Not seen any that I can definitely say are that tree, but it was kind of like a pine tree, but it didn't have the needles. So I'm not super looking forward to this one, but you can see it's even pretty similar. This is the not a pine tree bark, and this is the pine tree bark. You can see it's not too dissimilar, especially on the back side. You could almost think that they're just two different pieces from the same tree. It has much of the same textures. It's kind of dry. It's kind of crumbly. Yeah, so I'm expecting this to be a pretty dry, pretty inedible one as well, but we'll see. So it's not as bad as the pine. It's not as bad, but it's definitely, I got a hint of bitter. It's definitely bitter. Definitely wow. It really has a kick there at the end. It wasn't as dry, but it is, I would say it's the second driest bark there. And man, I am still tasting it. Like it wasn't too bitter there at the beginning, but then right as I went to swallow it, it just hit me really hard. So yeah, that one's probably the most bitter. All right, so we've got 2 more barks to go. We're 4 down, 2 to go. This one, honestly, I have no idea what kind of tree it was, but interesting story. So the bark of this tree is very, it's already flaky, like it's already layered. And so instead of cutting off a piece of bark, man, it's still hitting me, that bitter. Instead of cutting off a piece of bark, I just went and like tore this off. And some sort of bug was making its home under this piece of bark, because as soon as I tore it off, this bug just darted out and hit my hand. So yeah, so this cost some poor bug its home. I mean, you can see, you know, I was saying that it's very flaky, sort of layered, and you can see not so much on the front, right? This is what the front looks like if the camera will focus. There we go. But on the back, you can see it's got these sort of layers there, and that's kind of how the whole bark looked, was like this, with the layers. But yeah, it's a really interesting kind of wood. Doesn't look like the kind of wood you'd build something out of. If I can get my camera to focus. No, it doesn't really doesn't want to, but it's got a very interesting texture, which I don't know if it's coming across. And yeah, so I'm not really sure on this one where you'd consider the bark to end and the tree to begin. So I'm just going to tear off a piece that's kind of a nice, whoop, this one's kind of crumbly. I don't know if you saw that. So I'm going to try and tear off just, yeah, like an end bit right there. And we'll give this one a go. Whoop. Bitter. Not too bitter thus far. That one probably has the nicest actual texture of ooh, no, it's just like the last one. Really hit me there at the end. But so far that one probably has the nicest actual texture. Wasn't dry, and it was very, very easy to chew. And it just it broke apart, but it didn't completely disintegrate in my mouth, so I was actually really able to properly chew it. But it did have quite a bit of bitter. So originally the request was, what are the textures? I'd say thus far that one wins on texture. So now I've got the last one, which I'm pretty sure is oak. Here. Is that, it kind of, if you see like that tree right there, that's what it looked like. I think that's an oak. I don't know. It was similar to, it wasn't that tree, but it was similar. But you can see lots. This was probably the mossiest, and it's got the or kind of lichen almost growing on it. It kind of gives off an air of being old bark. That's what I would say it gives off. And you can see there's the very reddish backside to the bark there. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting pattern on the wood as well. Not as quite as interesting as the last one, but still pretty good. So yeah, so I'm going to be eating quite a bit of moss with this one. Let me tear off a small piece there. Dry. That one's probably that one's up there in dryness. You know, you can actually taste the moss, which is interesting. You can definitely taste the moss. Which is kind of nice, because then you get kind of a layered flavor, right, of the bark and the moss, and they do work together. Yeah, so I think although it was the most bitter, I think the second to last bark had probably the best actual texture. This one did have a good texture too. Don't get me wrong. This was probably second place, and this oaky one, it was very similar but not quite as good. And I would say that due to Sort of like I said, that intermingle of the moss and the bark. Probably this was my favorite overall. So yeah, thanks for stopping by. That was my take on various barks.